Every car repair, no matter how simple it starts, eventually comes down to one thing: a rusted, seized bolt that will not budge. You're leaning on the wrench with everything you've got, your knuckles are bleeding, and you can feel it. That bolt's about to either round off or snap clean in half, and now your 2-hour job just became a 2-day nightmare. So before you buy another can of the usual stuff that barely works for this, let me show you a $1 mix that frees rusted bolts better than almost anything on the store shelf, plus the technique that keeps you from snapping them in the first place. Here's my promise. I'm going to give you the cheap mix that actually works, the exact way to use it, and the extra tricks the pros use on the really stubborn ones. And pay close attention near the end, because I'll show you the #1 mistake that snaps. Bolt's the thing most people do out of frustration that turns a stuck bolt into a disaster. Plus what to do if a bolt is already rounded off or snapped. Knowing all this will save you a world of pain. Let me quickly explain why bolts seize in the first place, because it tells you exactly how to beat them. When metal is exposed to moisture and air over the years, it rusts, and here's the key. Rust actually takes up more space than the original metal. So as a bolt and the threads around it rust, that expanding rust wedges everything together tighter and tighter like a natural glue, locking the threads solid. There's a second thing that makes it worse too. When you've got two different metals touching like a steel bolt threaded into an aluminum part, which is extremely common on modern cars, they react with each other and basically corrode themselves together into one solid piece. That's why bolts in aluminum can be the absolute worst to get out. So when you try to turn that bolt, you're not just fighting the bolt, you're fighting all that expanded rust and corrosion jammed into the threads, which means the secret isn't brute force. The secret is getting something in there to break down and lubricate that corrosion so the threads can move again, and that's exactly where the right penetrant comes in. Now, most people grab the famous blue and yellow can for this, but here's the honest truth, and it's the same thing I've told you before. That original spray is mostly a water displacer and a light lubricant, not a heavy-duty penetrant. It's great for a squeaky hinge or chasing moisture out, but for a truly seized, rusted bolt, it just doesn't soak deep enough into the threads to do the job. So people spray it, crank on the bolt, and it snaps, and they blame the bolt. It was the wrong tool. Let me tell you how I learned this the hard way. Years ago, I was young, working on an exhaust bolt that was rusted solid, and I did exactly what I'm telling you not to do. I hit it with the blue can, waited about 30 seconds, and cranked on it as hard as I could. It snapped off flush deep in the manifold. What should have been a 10-minute job turned into hours of drilling and extracting, and I nearly ruined the part. That one snap bolt taught me everything I'm about to show you, because I never wanted to feel that sick feeling again. And you don't have to, because I'm handing you what took me years to learn. Here's the $1 fix that actually works. And it's something machinists and old timers have used for decades. A 50-50 mix of automatic transmission fluid and acetone. That's it. Equal parts ATF, the same red transmission fluid, and acetone, the stuff from a hardware store or even nail polish remover. You mix them in a small container, and you've got a penetrant that, in real side-by-side tests, has been shown to beat the expensive commercial penetrants and absolutely embarrass the basic spray can for pennies. The acetone is thin and creeps deep into the rusted threads, carrying the ATF with it, and the ATF lubricates and clings so the bolt can finally break free. $1's worth of stuff you might already have, and it outperforms products that cost 10 times as much. One tip: mix up a small batch in a sealed metal or glass container and shake it before each use, since the two separate over time, and keep it clearly labeled and away from heat. Real quick, before I show you how to use it, one thing, because it'll save you more than any single trick in this video. Everything I teach on this channel, every fix, every trick, every shop scam, I put into one guide called Don't Get Fleeced. The complete playbook, read your own check engine codes, decode every dashboard light, know which recommended services are real and which are pure padding, and walk into any shop already knowing exactly what your car needs and what it should cost. It's one PDF. It costs less than a single diagnostic fee, and it lives on your phone, so it's right there in your pocket in the parking lot when a mechanic hands you a number. If you're tired of feeling like an easy target, this is how you stop being one. Links in the description and the pinned comment. Grab it, then let's break that bolt loose. So here's how you actually use the mix, because how you apply it matters as much as what it is. First, if you can, get a wire brush and knock the loose rust and crud off the bolt and the surrounding area, so the penetrant can actually reach the threads instead of soaking into surface grime. Then apply your ATF acetone mix generously, right where the bolt threads into the metal. That's where the rust is locking it, so that's where the penetrant needs to get. Now here's the part almost everyone skips, and it's the difference between success and a snapped bolt. Patience, let it soak. Give it 15 minutes at the very least, and for a really stubborn one, soak it, walk away, come back and soak it again, and let it sit for a few hours or even overnight. That penetrant needs time to wick down into the threads and do its work. The people who fail are the ones who spray and immediately crank. The people who win are the ones who soak, wait, and reapply. Now, one honest and important safety note, because acetone and ATF are flammable, keep them away from any open flame or sparks and use them in a ventilated area. That matters for the next trick, so listen carefully. Because trick number 2 is the most powerful weapon you've got against a seized bolt. Heat. Remember how rust and corrosion expand and wedge the threads together? Heat works by expanding the metal of the nut or bolt head just enough to crack that bond and break its grip. You take a small torch, a propane or MAP gas torch, and you heat the nut or the bolt head directly for a bit, then let it cool a little, and often you'll hear or feel that rust bond crack right loose. Heat, then try to turn it. And here's a bonus old-timer trick that works incredibly well with heat. Once the bolt is good and hot, touch an ordinary candle or a stick of paraffin wax to the threads. The wax melts instantly and gets wicked right down into the threads by the heat, acting as a lubricant that pulls deep where sprays can't reach. Heat plus wax has freed bolts I thought were hopeless. But here's the critical safety part. Do not use your torch while the flammable penetrant is soaking there or fresh on the bolt. You'll start a fire. Either apply penetrant and let it dry off first before heating, or heat the bolt, let it cool, and then apply the penetrant so it wicks in as the metal contracts. And never ever use a torch near fuel lines, the fuel tank, rubber, brake lines, wiring, or anything flammable. Used carefully, heat is the single most effective trick for a bolt that refuses everything else. Trick number 3 is simple, but it works. Shock it. Take a hammer and give the head of the bolt a few firm direct taps. That impact sends a shock wave through the bolt that helps crack and loosen the rust grip on the threads, and it helps the penetrant work its way deeper. This is also exactly why an impact wrench works so well on rusted bolts. It's not just spinning, it's hammering the bolt loose with hundreds of rapid little shocks per second while it turns. If you've got access to an impact wrench, it's often the fastest way through a stubborn bolt. But if you're doing it by hand, a few good taps with a hammer, then try again, does the same thing on a smaller scale. Now here's the number 1 mistake I promised you. The thing that turns a stuck bolt into a snapped one or a rounded off nightmare. When a bolt won't move, people get frustrated and just crank harder and harder in one direction with everything they've got. Don't. That's exactly how you snap the bolt off flush, which is 100 times worse to deal with, or round off the head so no tool can grip it. Instead, work it back and forth. Once you've got some penetrant and maybe some heat in there, try to tighten it just a hair first, then loosen, then tighten, then loosen, rocking it back and forth in tiny movements. Each little movement lets penetrant work deeper and breaks the rust loose gradually instead of all at once. And use the right tools. A 6-point socket grips a rusty bolt far better than a 12-point, which is more likely to slip and round the head, and a longer breaker bar gives you smooth, controlled force instead of a violent jerk. Smooth, patient, back and forth, that's how bolts come out whole. But let's say the worst has already happened. The bolt is rounded off or snapped, because that's the reality sometimes. Don't panic, because you've still got options before you give up. If the head is rounded so a regular socket won't grip, they make special bolt extractor sockets, sometimes called rounded bolt removers, that bite into a stripped head and grip it. For a nut that's rounded or rusted solid, a tool called a nut splitter clamps over it and cracks it right off without damaging the threads underneath. And if a bolt has snapped off flush, you can drill into the center and use a bolt extractor, or if there's a stub sticking out. A pro trick is to weld a nut onto the broken end. The heat of the weld actually helps free it, and now you've got a fresh nut to turn. Those are your rescue moves. So a snap bolt doesn't have to mean a ruined part. And here's the honest truth about all of this, because I'm not going to oversell you a miracle. This mix and these tricks free a rusted bolt. They break its grip so it comes out, but nothing you spray on a bolt destroys rust forever, no matter what a thumbnail promises. The real way to make sure you never fight that bolt again is what you do when you put it back together. Coat the threads with a little anti-seize compound before you reinstall it. Anti-seize is a cheap tube of grease-like paste that stops the threads from rusting and corroding together. So next time, and there's always a next time, that bolt spins right out. Penetrant gets it out today. Anti-seize keeps it easy forever. That's the honest 1 to 2 punch. Let me tie it all together. When you hit a rusted seized bolt, skip the basic spray can and mix up equal parts ATF and acetone for a penetrant that beats products 10 times the price. Brush off the crud, soak the threads generously, and most importantly, be patient and let it work, reapplying and waiting instead of cranking. For the stubborn ones, add heat carefully to crack the bond, use the candle wax trick, and tap the bolt head to shock it loose. Then work it gently back and forth with a 6-point socket and a breaker bar instead of forcing it one way. If it does round or snap, reach for an extractor socket, a nut splitter, or the weld-a-nut trick. And when you put it back, hit the threads with anti-seize so you never fight it again. Do that, and bolts that used to snap and ruin your whole day will come out clean for about $1. Here's the bottom line. The expensive sprays and the Miracle Rust products are mostly marketing. The stuff that actually works has been sitting in garages for decades and costs almost nothing. You just had to know the mix and the technique. Now you do. And that's the whole idea around here. The more you know, the less anyone can sell you. And remember, the full guide, Don't Get Fleeced, is in the description and the pinned comment if you want every money-saving trick like this for your whole car in one place. Before you go, hit that like button if this is going to save you from snapping a bolt someday. It genuinely helps this reach more people fighting rust in their driveway right now. And drop me 2 things in the comments. First, what's the worst seized bolt you've ever fought? We've all got a story. Second, what do you want next? Should I show you how to get out a bolt that's already snapped off flush, or the cheap tools every DIYer should own? You tell me, I'll make it. And subscribe, because I've got a whole garage full of these, coming the cheap tricks, the honest truth, and the stuff the expensive brands hope you never figure out. Thanks for trusting me, and thanks for sticking with me all the way to the end. I'll see you in the next one.